My wife fired me as soon as she became CEO of the family business. Your services and poor love are no longer required, she announced during the board meeting. I helped schedule. Clear your office by tomorrow and move out tonight. I nodded calmly and couldn't stop laughing. Next morning would be fun. They say you never see the knife coming when it's held by someone you love. I'm standing in the boardroom right now, our boardroom, the one I designed 3 years ago when we renovated the top floor, and I'm watching my wife of 12 years tell me I'm fired. Not just fired, erased, deleted, rendered obsolete like outdated software. She's finally getting around to uninstalling. Your services are no longer required, Catherine says. And her voice has that particular quality I've come to recognize over the past 6 months. Cold, clinical. The voice she uses when she's reading quarterly reports or rejecting vendor proposals. Never the voice she used to use when she'd call me from business trips, whispering that she missed me, that she couldn't wait to come home. But that was before. Before her father died, before the will was read, before Catherine Harrington Chen became Catherine Harrington Chen, CEO of Harrington Industrial Solutions, the family business her great-grandfather built in 1952. I'm her husband. Was her husband? Still am her husband, technically, for another few minutes at least, until the paperwork she's no doubt already prepared makes its way through whatever express legal channels the Harrington family keeps on retainer. Your poor love, she continues, and there's something almost artistic about the way she emphasizes that word, is also no longer required. Around the table, the board members, her uncle Richard, her cousin James, the family lawyer Martin Bexley, and two outside directors who've been with the company since her father's tenure, sit in various states of discomfort. Richard is studying his water glass, like it contains the secrets of the universe. James has the decency to look away. Martin Bexley, though, is watching me with the kind of professional curiosity you'd expect from someone who bills $800 an hour to witness human suffering. Clear your office by tomorrow, Catherine says. She's standing at the head of the table, backlit by the floor-to-ceiling windows that overlook downtown Seattle. It's raining because of course it is. The sky is the color of old dishwater, and the Space Needle looks like a lonely sentinel in the distance. And I think absurdly that I'll miss this view. And move out tonight, the meeting I helped schedule. That's the part that keeps circling in my brain like a trapped bird. I scheduled this meeting. I sent out the calendar invites. I coordinated with everyone's assistants. I even ordered the catering. There's a tray of untouched croissants and fruit on the credenza, mocking me with their cheerful mundanity. I should feel something, I think. Rage, betrayal, the hot, sharp sting of humiliation. Instead, I feel nothing. No, that's not quite true. I feel the laugh building in my chest like carbonation, bubbles of pure absurdity rising up through my ribcage. I see, I say, and my voice is steady. Calm. I've been practicing this calmness for 6 months, ever since I realized what was happening, since I understood where this was all heading. Is there anything else, or is that the extent of this particular performance? Catherine's jaw tightens. There it is. That microscopic crack in her composure. She hates it when I don't react the way she expects. Always has. It's one of the things that drew her to me in the first place, back when we met at a charity gala 13 years ago. I was working as a consultant then, helping small businesses optimize their operations, and she was the brilliant, beautiful heiress who seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say about supply chain management. This isn't a performance, Daniel, she says. This is a business decision. Of course it is, I say. I nod slowly, thoughtfully, the way I used to nod when we'd sit up late at night, planning the future of the company, dreaming about what we could build together. A business decision. The laugh escapes then. Just a small one. A brief exhalation of sound that makes James flinch, and Richard finally look up from his water glass. Catherine's eyes narrow. Something funny? No, I say, and I'm smiling now. I can feel it stretching across my face. Nothing's funny, everything's perfectly clear. I stand up and the movement feels significant somehow, like I'm rising from more than just a leather executive chair. I'm wearing the suit Catherine bought me last Christmas, Navy Tom Ford, tailored to perfection, probably cost more than my first car. She has excellent taste, had excellent taste in me once upon a time. I'll have my office cleared by morning, I say. I look around the table, meeting each person's eyes in turn. Richard, who taught me to play golf and used to call me son. James, who was my groomsman. Martin Bexley, who I've never liked and who has clearly been planning this with Catherine for weeks, maybe months. And I'll be out of the house tonight. Good, Catherine says. But there's something uncertain in her voice now. Some small wobble in the foundation of her confidence. She expected tears, maybe. Begging, a scene. The Daniel she remembers would have made a scene. But that Daniel is gone. He's been gone since the day I found the file on her laptop. The file labeled Transition Plan. The file that outlined in meticulous detail exactly how Catherine intended to remove me from every aspect of her life. From the company, from the house, from the family, from existence, essentially. Tomorrow morning, then, I say, and I nod once more, polite, professional, the consummate employee receiving his termination with grace, and then I walk out of the boardroom. The door closes behind me with a soft, expensive click. And in the elevator, descending from the 20th floor to the parking garage, I start laughing. I laugh until tears run down my face. I laugh until my sides hurt. I laugh because tomorrow morning is going to be so much fun. You need context. Everyone needs context. That's what I've learned in my 12 years with Catherine, in my 8 years working at Harrington Industrial Solutions, in my 36 years on this planet, trying to figure out how the world actually works. Context is everything. So here's the context. I met Catherine Harrington at the Four Seasons Hotel in downtown Seattle on October 40th, 28th. It was a fundraiser for pediatric cancer research, the kind of event where tickets cost $1,000 and the wine flows like water and everyone pretends to care deeply about the cause while really just networking and sizing up potential business partners. I was there because my consulting firm, 3 guys in a rented office space, barely scraping by, had been hired to help organize the event logistics. I was 24, wearing a suit I'd bought at Nordstrom Rack, and I was supposed to be invisible. The help. The person who makes sure the AV equipment works and the speeches start on time. Catherine was 26, recently returned from getting her MBA at Wharton, and she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen. Not magazine beautiful, not artificial. She had her mother's Italian features and her father's English reserve, dark hair that fell to her shoulders, and this way of listening to people that made you feel like you were the only person in the room. She found me by the audio console, frantically trying to fix a microphone that had decided to start producing feedback at the exact moment the keynote speaker was approaching the podium. "You look stressed," she said. "The mic's possessed," I said, not looking up. "I'm performing an exorcism." She laughed, actually laughed. "Want help?" "Unless you have a degree in audio engineering, I'm not sure there's much." "I have a degree in business administration," she said. "But I spent 3 summers working tech for my high school theater productions." "Move." She fixed it in 30 seconds. Something about a loose connection and proper grounding. The keynote speaker gave his speech. The event was a success. And afterward, Catherine found me again. "Buy you a drink?" she asked. "I can't afford drinks here," I said honestly. "I'm working." "I can," she said. "And technically, my family is sponsoring this event, so I think I can expense it." We talked until 2 in the morning. She told me about growing up in the Harrington family, about the pressure and the expectations and the strange isolation of being part of Seattle's old money aristocracy. About how her father, Robert Harrington, was grooming her brother Marcus to take over the company, even though Marcus had no interest in business and just wanted to be a photographer. I told her about growing up in Tacoma, about my father leaving when I was 8, about my mother working 3 jobs to keep us afloat, about putting myself through the University of Washington on scholarships and student loans that I'd probably be paying off until I was 50. "You're not what I expected," she said at one point. "What did you expect?" "I don't know. Someone who'd be impressed by me. By my family. By the money." "Are you impressed by it?" I asked. She thought about that. "Not really. It's just what I know. It's just how things are." "Then why would I be impressed?" That was the moment. I've replayed it 1,000 times in my head over the years, trying to pinpoint the exact second when everything that followed became inevitable. That was the moment Catherine Harrington decided I was different, special, worth keeping. We dated for 8 months before she introduced me to her father. Robert Harrington was a titan. That's the only word that fits. 6'3", silver hair, voice like rolling thunder. He'd taken his grandfather's mid-sized industrial supply company and turned it into a regional powerhouse, securing contracts with Boeing, Microsoft, Amazon, every major player in the Pacific Northwest. He believed in discipline, in tradition, in the unassailable importance of family legacy. He did not believe in me. "You're a consultant," he said during our first dinner together at the Harrington family estate in Medina. The house was a mansion, all stone and wood and windows overlooking Lake Washington. "What does that mean?" "Exactly. It means I help businesses optimize their operations," I said. "Usually small to medium enterprises. I analyze their workflows, identify inefficiencies, implement solutions." "Sounds like something anyone with common sense could do," Robert said. "Robert," Catherine's mother Grace murmured. She was dying even then, though we didn't know it yet. Cancer. It would take her 8 months later. "Common sense isn't that common," I said. "Most business owners are too close to their own operations to see the problems clearly. That's where I come in, outside perspective." Robert studied me. "Catherine tells me you grew up in Tacoma." "Yes, sir. Your father?" "Not in the picture. Mother? Retired now. She worked in food service for 30 years. The disapproval was palpable. You could have sliced it with a knife and served it on one of the Harrington family's fine china plates. But Catherine reached over and took my hand, right there at the dinner table, in front of her father, in front of her dying mother, and her indifferent brother. She took my hand and squeezed it and said, "Dad, I love him." We got married 6 months later. People think money solves problems. It doesn't. It just changes them, upgrades them, turns them from immediate survival crises into long-term existential anxieties. The first year of our marriage, Catherine and I lived in a condo in Capitol Hill that her father bought us as a wedding present. It was twice the size of anywhere I'd ever lived, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the Space Needle and furniture that cost more than my mother's annual salary. And I kept working as a consultant. Catherine took a position at Harrington Industrial Solutions as a senior analyst, working her way up from the bottom despite her last name. She was determined to prove herself, to show her father and the board that she wasn't just riding on nepotism. We were happy. God, we were happy. We'd stay up late talking about the company, about business strategy, about the inefficiencies Catherine was noticing in his operations. I'd share my consulting insights, and she'd absorb them like a sponge, asking questions, pushing back when she disagreed, refining ideas until they sparkled. "You should come work for his," she said one night. We were in bed, her head on my chest, my fingers running through her hair. "I don't think your father would appreciate that," I said. "My father respects results. If you can show results, he'll come around." She was right, sort of. It took 2 years, but eventually Robert Harrington offered me a position. Not in operations, where my skills would have been most useful, but in business development. Sales, essentially. Schmoozing clients, playing golf, taking buyers out for expensive dinners, and convincing them that his was the right partner for their industrial supply needs. I was terrible at it. "You're too honest," Catherine's uncle Richard told me after I lost a major contract to a competitor. "You tell them exactly what we can and can't do. You need to oversell. Make promises. We can figure out delivery later." "That's fraud," I said. "That's business." But I learned. You learn or you drown. I learned to smile and exaggerate and paint rosy pictures that were technically true but fundamentally misleading. I learned to play golf and laugh at bad jokes and remember the names of clients' children and pets. I learned to be what Robert Harrington needed me to be, an acceptable husband for his daughter. Meanwhile, Catherine rose. She moved from analyst to manager to director to vice president. She was brilliant. Everyone could see it. She had her father's strategic mind and her mother's emotional intelligence. She could read a room, navigate corporate politics, make hard decisions without flinching. When Grace Harrington died, 5 years into our marriage, the cancer finally winning, Catherine channeled her grief into work. She launched a new division focused on sustainable industrial solutions. She secured a multi-million-dollar contract with a green energy startup. She became indispensable, and she's the future of this company, Robert told me at Grace's funeral. We were standing by the grave, watching workers lower the casket into the ground. "Marcus doesn't have the head for business. It's going to be Catherine. She'll be great," I said. "She will," Robert agreed. "Question is, will you?" I didn't understand what he meant at the time, but I do now. Robert Harrington had a stroke on March 3rd, 2024. He was in his office reviewing quarterly reports when his brain simply betrayed him. One moment, he was the titan, the patriarch, the unshakable foundation of the Harrington Empire. The next moment, he was on the floor, his left side paralyzed, his speech reduced to slurred nonsense. He lived for 4 months after that, on 4 months in a hospital bed at Swedish Medical Center, tubes running in and out of him, machines breathing for him, his mind still sharp enough to understand what was happening, but his body refusing to cooperate. Catherine visited him every day. So did I. We'd sit with him, reading the business reports out loud, pretending he could still make decisions, still guide the company he'd spent his life building. He died on July 14th. The funeral was enormous. 600 people crammed into St. James Cathedral. The mayor spoke. The CEO of Boeing sent a video tribute. Catherine delivered a eulogy that was so perfectly balanced between grief and strength that I saw grown men crying. I stood beside her, holding her hand, being the supportive husband. I had no idea what was coming. The will was read 3 days later in Martin Bexley's downtown office. The entire Harrington family was there. Catherine and Marcus, Robert's brother Richard, Richard's children, James and Victoria, assorted cousins and second cousins, and family friends who were practically family. Martin Bexley cleared his throat and began reading. Most of it was expected. Charitable donations, trusts for the grandchildren Catherine and I hadn't had yet. The family estate to Catherine, investment portfolios divided among various family members. And then, to my daughter, Catherine Margaret Harrington, I leave controlling interest in Harrington Industrial Solutions, with the stipulation that she assume the role of Chief Executive Officer immediately upon my death, and that she exercise full authority over all business operations, personnel decisions, and strategic direction of the company. Catherine's hand tightened on mine. To my son, Marcus David Harrington, I leave a 20% stake in Harrington Industrial Solutions, with the understanding that his primary interests lie elsewhere, along with the property in San Juan Islands and the means to pursue his artistic endeavors without financial constraint. Marcus nodded. He'd expected this, wanted this even. To my brother, Richard, and to the extended Harrington family, I leave gratitude and the assurance that Catherine will honor the legacy we've built. There was more, but none of it mattered. Catherine was CEO. Catherine was in control. Catherine was the Harrington family now. We went home that night to our house in Madison Park. We'd moved there 3 years earlier, another gift from Robert, and Catherine opened a bottle of wine that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. To Dad, she said, raising her glass. To your dad, I echoed. We drank. You'll be amazing, I said. You know that, right? You're going to take the company to places your father never imagined. She looked at me then, and there was something in her eyes I'd never seen before. Something cold, calculating. We'll see, she said. It started small. Little things. Catherine working later. Coming home at 9, 10, 11 at night. Weekend calls that couldn't wait. Business trips that stretched from 3 days to a week to 2 weeks. I'm establishing my authority, she explained. I need the board to respect me. I need the employees to understand that things are changing. I understand, I said, and I did. Sort of. Taking over a company after your father dies, stepping into shoes that everyone assumes are too big for you. That takes effort. That takes sacrifice. What I didn't understand was why I was part of that sacrifice. The dinner stopped first. We used to have dinner together every night, sacred time, no phones allowed. But then Catherine started eating at the office. Then she started having working dinners with board members, with clients, with consultants. You should come, I'd say. These are business meetings, Daniel. It would be awkward. I work at the company, too. In business development. This is executive-level strategy. The bedroom was next. Catherine started going to bed later, waking up earlier. When we did manage to be in bed at the same time, she'd be on her laptop, reviewing documents, sending emails. Come back to me, I'd say, touching her shoulder. Not now, I'm working. It's midnight. Then go to sleep. The conversations dried up. We used to talk about everything, books, politics, family, dreams, stupid things we'd seen on the internet. Now we talked about logistics, who was picking up dry cleaning, whether we needed to schedule maintenance for her car. Did I remember to pay the lawn service? We became roommates, then we became strangers, then we became enemies, though only one of us knew it yet. I tried to bridge the gap, I really did. I'd plan date nights, make reservations at nice restaurants, suggest weekend getaways. I can't, Catherine would say. I have a board meeting. The board meeting is Thursday. I'm talking about Saturday. I need to prepare for the board meeting. Catherine, Daniel, please. I'm under a lot of pressure right now. Can you just give me some space? Space, that word haunted me. How much space, I wanted to ask. How much distance? When does space become permanent separation? When does a marriage become a memory? But I didn't ask. I gave her the space. I pulled back. I focused on my job at his, on maintaining relationships with clients, on being good at the one thing Robert Harrington had assigned me to do. And then, 6 months ago, I found the file. Catherine had left her laptop open on the kitchen island. This wasn't unusual. She was constantly leaving it open, constantly in the middle of something, constantly ready to jump back to work at a moment's notice. What was unusual was that she'd left it open while she was in the shower, and she'd left it open on a document instead of closing it or sleeping the screen. I wasn't snooping. I want to be clear about that. I was walking past, getting coffee, and I glanced at the screen out of habit the same way you might glance at someone's book cover on the bus. And I saw my name. Daniel Chen. Termination plan. The words stopped me like a physical wall. I stared at the screen. Upstairs, I could hear water running. Catherine singing softly, something by Sarah Bareilles. She'd be in the shower for at least 10 more minutes. She took long showers when she was stressed. I sat down. I read. The document was 23 pages long. It was dated 3 months earlier, which meant Catherine had been planning this since January. Since 3 months after her father's death, since the moment she'd truly consolidated power. The first section was titled Professional Transition. Daniel Chen currently holds the position of Senior Business Development Manager at Harrington Industrial Solutions. While his performance has been adequate, his skill set is not aligned with the company's future strategic direction under new leadership. Recommendation: termination during Q3 2024 restructuring. Severance package. Standard 6-month package, non-negotiable. Public rationale: structuring of business development division to focus on digital client acquisition. Adequate, not aligned. Standard severance. The words were like ice water in my veins. The second section was titled Personal Transition. Marital dissolution to be initiated concurrent with professional termination. This approach serves two purposes. 1. Creates clean break without prolonged emotional entanglement. 2. Protects company assets during divorce proceedings by establishing clear timeline of separation coinciding with employment termination. Recommendation: file for divorce immediately following termination, citing irreconcilable differences. Proposed settlement: Daniel retains Madison Park condo, purchased prior to marriage, gifted by Robert Harrington to both parties, but titled in Catherine's name. Negotiate reasonable buyout. Catherine retains all company stock, family estate, investment portfolios. Joint accounts to be divided 50-50. No alimony necessary given Daniel's employability and short duration of marriage. 12 years falls below threshold for permanent support under WA state law. The clinical precision of it was breathtaking. She'd thought of everything. She'd planned it all. She'd reduced 12 years of marriage to a property division spreadsheet. The third section was titled Narrative Management. Key concern: public perception of terminating spouse during vulnerable transition period, immediate post-CEO appointment. Solution: time termination for maximum plausible deniability. Wait 9-12 months after assuming CEO role. Establish pattern of company-wide restructuring. Frame Daniel's termination as part of larger strategic shift, not personal decision. Board support secured. Richard, James, Martin, all supportive. Marcus uninvolved but unlikely to object. Potential complications: Daniel's relationships with clients. Solution: transition key accounts before termination announcement. She'd secured board support. She'd calculated the timeline. She'd managed the narrative before the story even happened. And then I got to the final section, titled simply Notes. Now, Daniel is a good person. This is not about his character or his worth as a human being, but he was Robert's choice, not mine. He was the acceptable husband, the person who could be molded into a Harrington. I've spent 12 years trying to fit him into this life, And he's spent 12 years trying to fit himself into it, and neither of us has been honest about how poorly it's working. He's not a bad man. He's just not my man. Not anymore. Maybe he never was. I need to do this for both of us, even if he doesn't see it that way, even if he hates me. I need to set us both free. I sat there for a long time, staring at those words. Upstairs, the water stopped. Catherine would be drying off, doing her skincare routine, picking out clothes. I had maybe 5 minutes. I pulled out my phone. I photographed every page of the document, every word, every cold calculation, every carefully planned betrayal. Then I closed the laptop. I went back to drinking my coffee, and when Catherine came downstairs 20 minutes later, her hair still damp, wearing jeans and a soft sweater, looking almost like the woman I'd married, I smiled at her. Good shower? I asked. Perfect, she said. I was thinking we could grab lunch today. I have a break between meetings. I'd love that, I said. We went to her favorite bistro. We talked about nothing important. She told me about a difficult vendor negotiation. I told her about a client's ridiculous request for custom industrial supplies in millennial pink. We laughed. We held hands walking back to the car. We were the perfect couple, and the entire time I was thinking about the file, about the timeline, about Q3 2024, which meant I had maybe 3 months before everything fell apart. 3 months to plan, 3 months to prepare, 3 months to decide whether I was going to roll over and accept my adequate severance package and my negotiated buyout and my managed narrative, or whether I was going to do something else entirely. That night, I started building my own file. Here's what nobody tells you about revenge. It requires patience. Revenge is not a hot emotion. It's not the flash of anger that makes you want to throw something or yell or storm out. That's just rage, and rage is useless. Rage makes you sloppy. Rage makes you predictable. Real revenge is cold, methodical. It's a long game and played with perfect information and absolute commitment. It's research. I started with the company. I'd worked at Harrington Industrial Solutions for 8 years. I was in business development, which meant I was technically outside the core operations, but I wasn't blind. I knew people. I had access to systems. I understood how things worked. And I understood something Catherine apparently didn't realize. Her father had trusted me. Not overtly, not publicly. But Robert Harrington, in his final years, had started copying me on emails, asking my opinion on operational issues, including me in strategic planning sessions that had nothing to do with business development. You have good instincts, he told me once. You see things clearly. No ego clouding your judgment. I thought he was just being kind. Now I understood. He was testing me, grooming me, preparing me to be a real asset to the company, not just Catherine's acceptable husband. And in the process, he'd given me access to things. System permissions that hadn't been revoked when he died. Email chains that documented decisions and strategies. Financial data that showed the real state of his operations. I started downloading everything. Every document I could access, every email thread, every financial report. I copied it all to an encrypted external drive that I kept in my gym bag, figuring Catherine would never look there. She hadn't been to the gym with me in 2 years. What I found was fascinating. Harrington Industrial Solutions was profitable, very profitable, but it was also deeply inefficient. Robert had built an empire through force of personality and relationship management, but the actual operations were a mess. Redundant processes, bloated middle management, vendor contracts that hadn't been renegotiated in a decade, an IT infrastructure that was held together with duct tape and prayers. Catherine knew this. The entire restructuring narrative in her termination plan wasn't just cover. The company actually needed restructuring. But she was going about it wrong. She was cutting people without understanding what they did. She was renegotiating contracts without understanding the relationship capital her father had built. She was implementing new software systems without proper training or transition planning. She was making catastrophic mistakes, and the board was letting her because they were all old guard Harrington loyalists who didn't want to undermine the new CEO during her vulnerable transition period. Classic. I kept documenting. I built spreadsheets. I created analyses showing exactly how Catherine's changes were actually costing the company money, how her aggressive timeline was alienating key employees, how her lack of operational experience was creating bottlenecks and inefficiencies. I did this at night after Catherine was asleep. I did this on weekends when she was at the office. I did this during lunch breaks, sitting in my car in the parking garage, compiling evidence of systematic mismanagement. And then I started looking into Catherine's personal life. I didn't want to believe it. That's important. I need you to understand that. When you're married to someone for 12 years, when you've built a life with them, when you've been through deaths and celebrations and ordinary Tuesdays together, you don't want to believe they could be unfaithful. You'll make excuses. You'll rationalize. You'll tell yourself that the late nights are just work, that the distance is just stress, that the cold shoulder in bed is just exhaustion. You'll lie to yourself because the truth is too ugly. But I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Not after finding the termination plan, not after seeing exactly how disposable I was in Catherine's eyes. So I hired a private investigator. His name was Marcus Reed, no relation to Catherine's brother, and he came recommended by a client who'd used him during a messy divorce. Marcus was expensive, discreet, and thorough. He looked like someone's accountant, which was apparently perfect for surveillance work because nobody had ever noticed him. "What am I looking for?" he asked during our first meeting. We met in a coffee shop in Ballard, far from anywhere Catherine or I would normally go. "I don't know," I said honestly. "My wife is planning to divorce me. I want to know if there's a reason beyond the ones she's listed in her termination plan." I showed him the relevant pages on my phone. He read them without expression. "She's thorough," he said. "She's a CEO. Fair. Give me 2 weeks." He called me 12 days later. "We need to meet," he said. This time we met in his office, a cramped space in a building near the airport. Marcus had a wall of monitors showing various surveillance feeds, none of which I could identify. He handed me a folder. "Your wife is having an affair," he said without preamble. "Has been for approximately 8 months. Started in January, shortly after she became CEO." The words landed on me like physical blows. 8 months, January. The same month she'd started drafting the termination plan. "Who?" I asked. My voice sounded strange, distant. "Trevor Walsh. He's the COO at Cascade Tech Solutions, one of his major clients. They met during contract negotiations last fall. Relationship appears to have begun at a business conference in San Francisco in January." Marcus showed me photos. Catherine and a man I didn't recognize having dinner at a restaurant in Fremont, sitting close, touching hands across the table. Catherine and the same man entering a hotel in Bellevue. Different dates, different hotels, but the pattern was unmistakable. Catherine and Trevor Walsh kissing in the parking garage of the His building. At night, when most of the staff had gone home. "How serious is it?" I asked. "Hard to say definitively, but based on frequency and behavior, I'd call it serious. They see each other 2 to 3 times a week. They're not hiding it very well, which suggests either they think they're being careful or they don't care if they're discovered. My guess? She's planning to be divorced soon anyway, so the timeline doesn't concern her." Of course it didn't concern her. She had it all planned out. Professional termination followed immediately by personal termination. Clean break. No prolonged emotional entanglement. She'd already moved on. I was just the last loose end to tie up. "I need more," I said. "More evidence, more context. I need to know everything, his background, their communications if you can access them, financial entanglements. I need to know if this is just an affair or if it's part of something bigger." Marcus looked at me carefully. "What are you planning?" "I don't know yet," I said. "But whatever it is, I need perfect information." He nodded. "I'll dig deeper, but this is going to cost. I don't care what it costs." I said, "Find everything." Over the next 3 months, Marcus Reed earned every dollar I paid him. Trevor Walsh was 42, divorced with no children, and he was ambitious. He'd built Cascade Tech Solutions from a small IT consulting firm into a major player in the Pacific Northwest tech scene. His company did business with his to the tune of about $8 million annually. Not enough to make or break either company, but enough to matter. He was also, according to Marcus's research, looking to expand. Cascade Tech Solutions had been eyeing an acquisition, either being acquired by a larger firm or acquiring smaller competitors to build market share. "He's been in talks with several potential investors," Marcus told me during one of our meetings. "Nothing concrete yet, but there's definitely interest. Guy like this, hooking up with the CEO of a major industrial client? That's not romance. That's strategy. What kind of strategy? My guess? He's leveraging the relationship to secure a stronger position with his, maybe angling for an exclusive contract or preferential terms. If he plays it right, he can use that connection to show investors that Cascade Tech Solutions has deep ties with major regional players, makes his company more attractive for acquisition or funding. I thought about that. And Catherine? She's either in on it or she's being used. Hard to say which. Could be both. I needed to know which. So I started attending the same business networking events where Trevor Walsh appeared. Chamber of Commerce meetings, industry conferences, charity fundraisers. I made sure to introduce myself, made sure he knew I was Catherine's husband. Trevor Walsh was handsome in that generic executive way. Good haircut, expensive watch, gym membership he actually used. He had a firm handshake and a practiced smile. Daniel Chen, he said when we met at a tech industry mixer in Pioneer Square. I've heard great things. Catherine speaks very highly of you. Liar. She's mentioned you too, I said smoothly. Cascade Tech Solutions is doing great work with his. We try. Your wife is an impressive leader. Very focused, very clear about her vision. She is, I agreed. Though I imagine having good partners makes it easier. Companies like yours that understand the technology side of industrial operations. We talked for 20 minutes. Surface level stuff. Business trends, the Seattle market, the challenges of scaling operations. The entire time, I was studying him, watching how he held himself, listening to what he didn't say. And I understood. Marcus was right. This wasn't love. This was calculation. Trevor Walsh saw Catherine as an opportunity. And Catherine, brilliant, strategic Catherine, either saw Trevor the same way or was blind to being used. I had 3 months before Q3 ended. 3 months before Catherine planned to execute her termination plan. I needed to work faster. Nights became my productive hours. Catherine was working late consistently now, often not coming home until after 11. When she did come home, she'd pour herself a glass of wine, maybe eat something light, then disappear into her home office to work some more. We barely spoke. How was your day? I'd ask. Busy, she'd say. That was it. That was our marriage in its final months. Busy. But those empty evenings gave me time. I compiled everything into a master file. Multiple copies, actually, one on my encrypted external drive, one in a cloud storage account Catherine didn't know about, one physical copy stored in a safety deposit box I'd rented under my mother's name. The file contained Section 1, Financial Mismanagement. Detailed analysis of every operational decision Catherine had made since becoming CEO. The contracts she'd renegotiated that actually increased costs. The staff she'd cut who were doing critical work. The technology implementations that were failing because of poor training. The vendor relationships she'd damaged through aggressive negotiating tactics. I documented it all with internal memos, budget reports, and comparative analyses showing where Robert's strategy had been working and where Catherine's changes were creating problems. The company wasn't failing, not yet, but it was trending in the wrong direction. Revenue was down 6% year over year. Employee satisfaction scores had dropped by 15 points. 2 major clients had declined to renew contracts. Small problems now. Catastrophic problems in 2 years if the trend continued. Section 2, Corporate Governance Violations. This was trickier, but I found them. Catherine had made several decisions that, while not illegal, violated his own corporate governance policies. She'd approved contracts without proper board review. She'd given herself a compensation package that exceeded the limits outlined in the company bylaws. She'd used company resources for personal expenses. Again, nothing criminal, but enough to raise serious questions about her judgment and her respect for the institutional structures her father had built. Section 3, Relationship. Conflicts of interest. Marcus Reed had obtained phone records showing hundreds of calls and texts between Catherine and Trevor Walsh. He'd documented their meetings, their hotel stays, their dinners, but more importantly, he'd uncovered financial connections. Cascade Tech Solutions had received a new contract with his in March, 2 months after Catherine and Trevor's affair began. The contract was worth $12 million, a 50% increase over the previous agreement, and it had been approved without the usual competitive bidding process. Catherine had justified this by claiming that Cascade Tech Solutions was a proven partner and that the time savings from avoiding the RFP process justified the increased cost. But the numbers didn't support that claim. Other vendors could have provided the same services for 30% less. Catherine had chosen Trevor's company despite better alternatives. That was a conflict of interest. That was using her position as CEO to benefit her personal relationship. That was, if not quite illegal, definitely unethical and potentially actionable by the board or by shareholders. Section 4, the termination plan. I included the entire document, every clinical, calculated word of it. This was my insurance policy. If Catherine tried to claim my termination was purely business, I had her own words showing it was personal. If she tried to claim the divorce was about irreconcilable differences rather than her affair, I had proof that she'd been planning this for months. I wasn't going to use it to be cruel. I wasn't going to publish it or make it public. But I was going to use it as leverage, as a reminder that she'd made choices and choices have consequences. I needed allies. Catherine had secured support from Richard James and Martin Bexley, but there were other board members and two outside directors who'd been appointed during Robert's tenure, specifically because they weren't family, because they were supposed to provide objective oversight. Dr. Patricia Morrison was a retired business school professor who specialized in organizational behavior. She'd been on the HIS board for 6 years, and Robert had respected her insights even when they challenged his decisions. David Okoro was a former executive at another industrial supply company who'd taken early retirement and now served on several boards. He was in his 60s, Nigerian American, and had a reputation for asking uncomfortable questions. I contacted them both, separately, discreetly, using my personal email, not my HIS account. I'm concerned about some operational decisions being made at HIS, I wrote. As someone who's worked closely with the company's operations for 8 years, I've been documenting some troubling patterns. I'd like to share this information with you with no strings attached and no expectation of action. You can do with it what you think is appropriate. Shirley Morrison responded first. Let's meet, she wrote back, but not at HIS. Somewhere neutral. We met at a coffee shop near the University of Washington campus. Patricia Morrison was in her 70s, with silver hair, cut short, and sharp eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. You're Catherine's husband, she said. Not a question. I am. This puts you in a difficult position? I know it does. Why come to me? I pulled out a tablet and showed her the summary of my research. Not everything, not the affair, not the termination plan, but the operational and financial issues, the decisions that were hurting the company. She read for 20 minutes without speaking. Finally, this is damning. Yes, Catherine is still learning. She's been CEO for less than a year. She's entitled to make mistakes. She is, I agreed. But these aren't learning mistakes. These are judgment mistakes, and they're getting worse, not better. Patricia studied me. What do you want? I want the board to do its job. I want oversight. I want someone to ask hard questions. And you think Catherine will listen? I think Catherine will respond to pressure from the board. She respects institutional authority, even if she doesn't always respect individuals. Patricia closed the tablet. You realize this could destroy your marriage. My marriage is already over, I said quietly. Catherine just hasn't told me yet. She looked at me for a long moment. I'll talk to David. We'll review what you've provided. No promises. That's all I ask. Catherine announced the board meeting for October 15th, 3 weeks away. I knew immediately what it was. Q3 ended September 30th. She'd wait 2 weeks to close out the quarter, get the financial reports finalized, then schedule a board meeting for mid-October, exactly as she'd planned in the termination document. I need you to help coordinate, she told me. We were having breakfast, a rare moment of intersection in our increasingly separate lives. Send out the invites. Make sure everyone can attend. Order catering. What's the agenda? I asked casually. Restructuring announcement. We're streamlining business development to focus more on digital client acquisition. There it was, the exact language from her plan. Sounds important, I said. It is. This is about positioning HIS for the next decade. I'll make sure everything's perfect. She smiled at me then, the first real smile I'd seen in months. Thank you, Daniel. I know things have been difficult lately. I appreciate your support. I wanted to laugh or scream or both. Instead, I said, Of course, that's what partners do. The word partners landed with particular weight. Catherine's smile flickered, just for a moment, and I saw something cross her face. Guilt? Regret? Or just irritation that I was making this harder than she'd planned. She left for the office 10 minutes later. I immediately called Marcus Reed. Timelines accelerated, I told him. Board meeting October 15th. That's when it's happening. You ready? Getting there. I need you to do something for me. Name it. I need proof of the affair. Video if possible. Something irrefutable. And I need it before the board meeting. That's 2.5 weeks. Can you do it? Probably. But we're talking about significant surveillance resources. This is going to cost. I already told you, I don't care what it costs. Your wife is going to notice large cash withdrawals. My wife is planning to divorce me. She's not paying attention to our joint accounts anymore. Trust me. Marcus was quiet for a moment. Then, you're playing a dangerous game. I know. If this blows up, it won't blow up. It's going to explode, but it's going to explode in a controlled direction. And when it's over, Catherine is going to understand exactly what she threw away. I worked out the math on my revenge, and revenge, I realized, was expensive. Marcus Reed's fees were approaching $30,000. The lawyer I'd quietly retained, not Martin Bexley, obviously, but a family law specialist named Jennifer Kwan, who'd handled several high-profile divorces, was another $15,000 in retainer fees. The storage costs for the safety deposit box, the encrypted cloud services, various other operational expenses, another $5,000, $50,000. I'd pulled it from our joint savings account in small increments over 3 months. 5,000 here, 7,000 there. Nothing large enough to trigger Catherine's attention, assuming she was even looking. She'd always handled most of our finances anyway, and with her father's estate settling and her new CEO salary, our joint accounts were flush enough that my withdrawals barely registered. Still, I covered my tracks. I told Catherine I was doing some home repairs. The deck needs refinishing, I said, and I want to update the basement home theater system. Whatever you think is best, she said absently. She was reviewing a contract, red pen in hand, not really listening. Perfect. I spent the days leading up to the board meeting in a strange state of calm. You know that feeling before a performance, before a presentation, before any moment when you've prepared as thoroughly as possible and all that's left is execution? That anticipation mixed with certainty? That's where I lived for 2 weeks. I went to work, I smiled at colleagues, and I took clients out for lunch and talked about industrial supply procurement like it mattered. I attended a wedding for one of Catherine's cousins and made small talk and laughed at appropriate moments. I was a ghost inhabiting my own life, counting down to the moment when I could finally be real again. Marcus called me on October 12th, 3 days before the board meeting. Got it, he said. Video? Clear as day. Hotel lobby security footage I managed to obtain through a contact. Shows your wife and Trevor Walsh entering the Woodmark Hotel in Kirkland together at 7 p.m. last Tuesday. Shows them leaving together the next morning at 6 a.m., timestamps and everything. That's circumstantial, I said. It is, but I've also got this. He sent me an audio file. Their conversation in the hotel bar before going up to the room. One of the staff was wearing a wire. Don't ask, you don't want to know. But it's clear they're not there for business. I listened to 30 seconds of the audio. Catherine's laugh. Trevor's voice saying something about how he'd been thinking about her all day. Catherine responding that she'd been counting down the hours. I stopped the playback. That's enough, I said. There's more if you need it. I won't need it. This is perfect. What are you going to do with it? I'm going to put it in my file, and I'm going to make sure Catherine knows it exists. You're not going to use it at the board meeting? No, that would be cruel and unnecessary. This is business, not personal. But I want her to know that I could. I want her to understand that I'm not the acceptable husband anymore. I'm the man with all the cards. Marcus was quiet for a moment. You've changed. People do, I said, especially when they finally see clearly. October 15th arrived with rain. Of course it did. Seattle in October is rain and gray skies and the smell of wet asphalt and dying leaves. The weather seemed almost poetic, like even nature understood the significance of the day. Catherine was up early, already dressed in her power suit, dark gray, perfectly tailored, the armor of a CEO about to make difficult decisions. You're up, she said when I appeared in the kitchen. She was making coffee, her back to me. Big day, I said. It is. She turned, coffee mug in hand. Thank you for coordinating everything. I know this hasn't been easy. What hasn't been easy? She paused, studied me, working at his under my leadership. The transition, everything. It's been an education. Shh, I said. Another pause. She was trying to read me, trying to understand if I suspected anything, but I'd had months to practice my poker face. The board meeting starts at 10, she said finally. You'll be there? Wouldn't miss it. Good. She set down her coffee mug, walked over to me, put her hand on my arm. Daniel, I want you to know, whatever happens today, I respect you. I respect what you've contributed to this company, to this family. The past tense was deliberate. I covered her hand with mine. That means a lot, Catherine. She held my gaze for a moment, and I saw something in her eyes. Sadness, relief, the complex emotions of someone about to end something they once cared about. Then she pulled away. I need to get to the office. I'll see you at 10. She left. I poured myself coffee, sat at the kitchen island, looked out at the rain. In 4 hours, everything would change. I was ready. The boardroom on the 20th floor of the Harrington Industrial Solutions building was designed to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Seattle. A table made from a single piece of reclaimed wood that had come from an old-growth Douglas fir. Leather chairs that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I'd helped design this room 3 years ago. Now I was sitting in it, watching my wife prepare to fire me. The board members arrived at 9:45 a.m. Richard Harrington, looking uncomfortable in a suit that was slightly too tight. James, his son, scrolling through his phone with the distracted air of someone who'd rather be elsewhere. Martin Bexley, the lawyer, carrying an expensive leather portfolio and wearing the expression of a man who knew exactly what was about to happen. Dr. Patricia Morrison arrived at 9:50 and she caught my eye briefly, a small nod. Acknowledgement. David Okoro arrived last at 9:55, apologizing for traffic. He took his seat and immediately pulled out a leather notebook, old school, the kind where you write things by hand. Catherine sat at the head of the table. I sat 6 chairs down in the middle of the board arrangement, close enough to hear everything, far enough to maintain the illusion of separation. Thank you all for being here, Catherine began. Her voice was strong, confident, the voice of someone who'd practiced this speech multiple times. We have several items to cover today, but I want to start with the most significant, operational restructuring. She pulled up a presentation on the large screen mounted on the wall, slides she'd spent weeks perfecting. As you know, his has been operating on the same business development model for nearly 2 decades. While this model served us well under my father's leadership, the marketplace has evolved. Digital client acquisition is now the primary driver of growth in our industry. We need to pivot. She clicked to the next slide. Organization chart. Boxes and lines showing the current structure of the business development division. To that end, I'm proposing we restructure our business development team. We'll be eliminating 3 senior positions and 2 junior positions, redirecting those resources toward building out a digital marketing team and investing in CRM automation. My name wasn't on the slide yet, but everyone in the room knew it was coming. Daniel, Catherine said, and her voice softened slightly. Whether genuine emotion or performance, I couldn't tell. I want to thank you for your 8 years of service to this company. You've been instrumental in maintaining client relationships and representing his in the business community. Past tense again. However, your position is among those being eliminated as part of this restructuring. Your services, she paused, and I could see her choosing her words carefully, are no longer aligned with our strategic direction. She clicked to another slide. Severance packages, 6 months salary, continuation of health benefits, standard corporate separation agreement. We're offering a generous severance package, Catherine continued, and of course, we'll provide excellent references for your next opportunity. Around the table, various board members were reacting in various ways. Richard looked sad. James looked bored. Martin Bexley looked satisfied. Patricia Morrison was watching me. David Okoro was writing something in his notebook. Catherine took a breath. And then, perhaps because she couldn't help herself, perhaps because she needed to fully own this moment, she added, Your poor love is also no longer required. The words hung in the air. Several board members looked confused. Martin Bexley's eyes widened slightly. That hadn't been in the script, and lawyers hate when clients go off script. I'm sorry, Patricia Morrison said. Could you clarify that last statement? Catherine realized her mistake. I meant his position. The position is no longer required. But the damage was done. She'd revealed something. Let the personal bleed into the professional. Clear your office by tomorrow, Catherine continued, trying to regain control. And she stopped. Because I was laughing, not loud, not hysterical, just a quiet, genuine laugh. Everyone turned to look at me. I'm sorry, I said, still smiling. I don't mean to interrupt. Please continue. Catherine's jaw tightened. Is something funny, Daniel? No, I said. I stood up slowly and I nodded to her, polite, respectful, the consummate professional. Everything's perfectly clear. Thank you for the opportunity to serve this company. I'll have my office cleared by tomorrow morning. I turned to leave. Daniel, Patricia Morrison said, before you go, I have a few questions for Catherine about this restructuring plan. If you wouldn't mind staying for a moment? I paused, turned back. Of course. Catherine looked uncertain. Patricia, I'm not sure what questions you could have. The restructuring plan has been reviewed. By whom? David Okoro asked, looking up from his notebook. By Martin and myself. Not by the full board, Patricia said. It wasn't a question. The CEO has authority to make operational decisions without full board approval, Martin Bexley interjected. That's clearly outlined in the corporate governance documents. Within certain parameters, David said. Major restructuring that eliminates 20% of a division typically requires board consultation. Catherine's confident expression was cracking. This is consultation. That's why we're having this meeting. This isn't consultation, Patricia said gently. This is notification. You've already made the decision. You've already prepared the severance packages. You've already set the timeline. She pulled out her own tablet. I have been reviewing his operational performance over the past 9 months, since you became CEO. Catherine's face paled slightly. Revenue is down 6% year over year. Employee satisfaction scores have dropped significantly. We've lost 2 major client contracts. Meanwhile, you've approved several large expenditures without competitive bidding, including, Patricia consulted her notes, a $12 million contract with Cascade Tech Solutions that represents a 50% increase over their previous agreement. Cascade Tech Solutions is a proven partner, Catherine said. The time savings from avoiding the RFP process justified the increased cost. Did it? David asked. Because according to the analysis I received, other vendors could have provided similar services for 30% less. That's a $3.6 million difference. That's not time savings. That's wasteful spending. Catherine looked at Martin Bexley. Where is this analysis coming from? Patricia Morrison looked at me. Daniel? This was it. The moment I'd been planning for 3 months. I reached into my bag and pulled out a folder. Not the full file, that would come later if needed, but enough. The operational analysis, the financial data, the documentation of poor decisions. I've been documenting operational concerns for the past several months, I said. My voice was calm, level. As someone who's worked closely with this company for 8 years, I felt it was my responsibility to ensure board members had complete information. I handed copies to Patricia and David. Richard and James looked confused. Martin Bexley looked furious. Catherine looked betrayed. You went behind my back, she said. I provided information to board members who have a fiduciary duty to oversee company operations. I corrected. That's not going behind your back. That's ensuring proper corporate governance. This is inappropriate, Martin Bexley said. Daniel, as an employee facing termination, you have a clear conflict of interest, which is why I'm not asking the board to take any action on my behalf, I said. I accept the termination, I accept the severance package, but the board has a right to know that there are serious operational concerns that go beyond my individual employment. Patricia was reading through the documents. So was David. This is quite detailed, Patricia said. I'm thorough, I replied. Catherine stood up. This meeting is not about Daniel's personal analysis of company operations. This meeting is about restructuring the business development division. This meeting is about the CEO's judgment, David interrupted. And frankly, Catherine, based on what I'm seeing here, I have serious concerns about your decision making over the past 9 months. I've been CEO for 9 months, Catherine shot back. I'm entitled to make changes. You're entitled to make competent changes, Patricia said. Changes that improve the company, not damage it. Changes that are made for strategic reasons, not personal ones. Silence. The words personal ones hung in the air like smoke. Catherine looked at me, really looked at me, and I saw the moment she understood. I knew. I knew about Trevor. I knew about the affair. I knew about all of it. I think, I said quietly, we should table the discussion about my termination for now. The board clearly needs to have a broader conversation about operational strategy. I looked at Catherine. I'll wait outside. I walked out of the boardroom. The door closed behind me with that same soft, expensive click. And in the hallway, with rain pattering against the windows and the city spread out below like a gray watercolor painting, I started laughing again. Because tomorrow morning was still going to be fun. The board meeting lasted 4 hours. I sat in the employee lounge on the 20th floor, drinking terrible coffee from the communal Keurig machine and watching rain streak down the windows. Other employees came and went, eyeing me curiously. Word had apparently spread that something significant was happening in the boardroom, but nobody asked questions. At 2:15 p.m., my phone buzzed. Patricia Morrison. We need to talk. Not today, tomorrow. 9 a.m., same coffee shop. Me. I'll be there. At 2:47 p.m., David Okoro emerged from the boardroom. He saw me, nodded once, and headed for the elevators without a word. At 3:30 p.m., Richard and James left together, talking in low voices. At 4:15 p.m., Martin Bexley stormed out, his face red, his expensive leather portfolio clutched under his arm like a shield. At 5 o'clock p.m., Catherine finally emerged. She looked exhausted. Her perfect CEO armor had cracked somewhere around hour 3, and now she just looked like a woman who'd been through an ordeal. She saw me. Our eyes met. We need to talk, she said. I agree. Not here. Home. I'll meet you there. I drove separately, which gave me time to think, to prepare, to center myself for whatever was coming. When I arrived at our house in Madison Park, the house Robert Harrington had gifted us, the house where we'd built 12 years of life together, Catherine was already there, standing in the kitchen with a glass of wine. Want one? She asked. No. She nodded, took a long drink, set the glass down. How long have you known? She asked. About all of it. The restructuring plan, the termination, She couldn't quite say it. The affair? I supplied. Since June. June. She closed her eyes. How? I found your file. Transition plan. Very thorough, by the way. Very strategic. Daniel? And then I hired a private investigator. He confirmed what I'd already suspected. You and Trevor Walsh, 8 months. Hotels in Bellevue, Kirkland, sometimes Portland, when you're supposedly at conferences. Catherine's face had gone pale. You hired a private investigator? I did. I have video evidence, audio recordings, phone records, financial documentation showing that you approved a $12 million contract for his company 2 months after your affair started. I paused. I have everything, Catherine. Every lie, every calculation, every moment you decided I was disposable. She sat down heavily on one of the kitchen bar stools. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. How is it supposed to happen? You fire me in front of the board, I accept my adequate severance package. We have an amicable divorce, and you move on with Trevor? Was that the plan? It's more complicated than that. Explain it to me then. Make me understand how 12 years of marriage becomes your services are no longer required. Catherine looked up at me, and there were tears in her eyes. Real tears, I thought, not performance. You were never supposed to be permanent, she said quietly. You understand that, don't you? My father chose you, not me. He chose you because you were safe, because you were moldable, because you were the acceptable husband who wouldn't threaten the family legacy. And her voice broke. I tried, Daniel. I really tried to love you the way you deserved. But you were always his choice, not mine. The words should have hurt more than they did. Maybe I'd known all along. Maybe some part of me had always understood that Catherine Harrington, brilliant and beautiful and born into Seattle aristocracy, had settled for me, had made the practical choice. had married the consultant from Tacoma because her father approved and because I fit the role of supportive husband. So Trevor is your choice? I asked. Trevor is, she struggled for words. Trevor is someone who sees me as an equal, who wants to build something with me, not just support something I'm building. Who doesn't look at me like I'm some impossible standard he's trying to live up to? I never looked at you that way. You did. You do. You've spent 12 years trying to be good enough for me, for my family, for this life. And I've spent 12 years feeling guilty that you had to try so hard. There was truth in that. Painful, complicated truth. So you decided to end it, I said. Professionally and personally, clean break. I thought it would be easier for both of us. If we just, if we ripped off the bandage. In front of the board? That was a mistake, the personal comment. I didn't mean to, she wiped her eyes. I'm sorry, I shouldn't have said that. But you meant it. I meant that we're over, that we've been over for a long time and neither of us has had the courage to admit it. Maybe she was right. Maybe we had been over. Maybe I'd been holding on to something that was already dead, preserved only by routine and obligation and the fear of starting over, but that didn't excuse what she'd done. You could have talked to me, I said. You could have been honest. Instead, you made a strategic plan for my removal. You treated me like a problem to be solved, not a person you'd built a life with. I know. And you started an affair with a business partner. You used your position as CEO to benefit Trevor's company. You compromised his interests for personal reasons. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. And now the board knows it. Patricia and David are going to recommend a full operational review. They're going to scrutinize every decision you've made since becoming CEO. They're going to find all the places where your judgment failed. Catherine's tears stopped. Her expression hardened. What do you want? What do I want? From this conversation, from this situation. You clearly have leverage. You have evidence. You could destroy me if you wanted to. So, what do you want? I thought about that. I'd spent 3 months planning this moment, 3 months documenting and researching and building my case. 3 months imagining exactly how I'd dismantled Catherine's world the way she'd planned to dismantle mine. But standing here in our kitchen, looking at my wife of 12 years, seeing her scared and angry and cornered, I realized something. I didn't want it to destroy her. I wanted her to understand. I want you to know that I wasn't disposable, I said finally. I want you to know that the years we spent together mattered, even if they're over. I want you to know that you made choices, and those choices had consequences, and you don't get to control how this ends just because you're the CEO. Catherine stared at me. I'm going to take the severance package, I continued. I'm going to clear my office tomorrow. I'm going to move out. We're going to get divorced, and we're going to split everything fairly, no matter what you thought fair meant in your transition plan. Daniel, but I'm also going to make sure the board knows everything, not the affair. That's between you and Trevor and your own conscience. But the operational issues, the financial concerns, the pattern of poor judgment, the board needs to know because his deserves better than a CEO who's making decisions based on emotions and relationships instead of strategy. They'll force me out, Catherine said quietly. If you give them all that evidence, they'll ask for my resignation. Maybe. Or maybe they'll give you a chance to fix it. To prove you can lead without letting personal complications cloud your judgment. That's up to you. I picked up my keys from the counter. I'll be staying at a hotel tonight. Tomorrow I'll come by to pack some things. We can figure out the details later. I walked toward the door. Daniel, Catherine called. I turned. For what it's worth, she said, you were always too good for this. For me, for this family, for all of it. No, I said. I was exactly good enough? You just never saw it. I left. I met Patricia Morrison at the same coffee shop near the University of Washington campus the next morning at 9 a.m. sharp. She was already there, 2 cups of coffee waiting on the table. You look tired, she said as I sat down. Long night. I imagine so. She pushed one of the coffees toward me. The board met again last night, emergency session, without Catherine. I sipped the coffee. It was better than the office Keurig swill. And we've decided to conduct a full operational review. External consultants, complete audit of every major decision made since Catherine became CEO. It'll take 3 months, maybe longer. What happens to Catherine in the meantime? She remains CEO, but with enhanced board oversight. Every major decision has to be approved by myself and David. She's essentially on probation. I nodded. That's fair, is it? Patricia studied me. You could have pushed for more. You could have demanded her resignation. The evidence you provided was damning enough. I could have, I agreed. But that's not what this is about. What is it about? Accountability. Catherine made mistakes, big ones, but she's not incompetent. She's brilliant, actually. She just let personal issues compromise her judgment. If she can separate those things, if she can focus on the actual work of running his, she might be great at it. Patricia smiled slightly. You're more generous than most people would be in your position. Maybe. Or maybe I just understand that revenge isn't the same as justice. Wise words. She pulled out a folder. Speaking of which, the board would like to make you an offer. I raised an eyebrow. I'm fired, remember? You're terminated from your business development position. But we'd like to hire you as a consultant. 6-month contract. You'll work directly with the external auditors, providing operational context and institutional knowledge. Essentially, you'll help clean up the mess. I stared at her. You're serious? Completely. David suggested it. He was impressed by the quality of your analysis. He said anyone who could document operational failures that thoroughly probably has good ideas about how to fix them. Catherine will hate this. Catherine doesn't have a choice. The board is invoking its oversight authority. If she wants to remain CEO, she has to accept our conditions. And one of those conditions is that we bring in people we trust to help with the operational review. I thought about it. Working at his for another 6 months, seeing Catherine regularly, navigating the awkward reality of being her soon-to-be ex-husband who's also consulting for the company she runs. It sounded complicated. It sounded messy. It sounded exactly like the kind of challenge I needed. What's the pay? I asked. Patricia named a figure that was double my former salary. I almost choked on my coffee. That's excessive. That's market rate for operational consultants with your level of expertise and institutional knowledge. Take it or leave it. I took it. I spent the morning clearing my office. 8 years of accumulated work life. Files, awards I'd never asked for, photos from company events, the fancy coffee mug Catherine had given me on our 5th anniversary, random desk supplies that I'd probably never use but felt wrong leaving behind. I was packing it all into boxes when someone knocked on my door. Come in, I said without looking up. Hey. I turned. James Harrington stood in the doorway looking uncomfortable. He'd always looked uncomfortable in business settings. Too tall for office furniture, too creative for corporate culture, too much his mother's son to thrive in his father's empire. Hey, I said, I heard what happened in the board meeting after you left. Did you? He nodded. Catherine lost it. Started yelling at Patricia and David. Said you'd sabotaged her, that you'd violated her trust, that you were bitter about the marriage ending. Am I? Bitter? James thought about that. I don't know, man. Are you? Ask me in 6 months. He laughed, then sobered. For what it's worth, I'm sorry about all of it. Catherine's my cousin and I love her, but what she did, the way she did it, that wasn't right. No, I agreed. It wasn't. You were always good to her, to all of us. You were, he struggled for words. You were the one who made sense, you know? Everyone else in this family is so caught up in the legacy and the expectations and the performance of being a Harrington. But you were just you. It was refreshing. Thanks, James. I mean it. He hesitated. Are you going to be okay? Yeah, I said, and I meant it. I'm going to be fine. He nodded, turned to leave, then stopped. Daniel, when you figure out what you're doing next after all this consultant work for the board, call me. I'm working on something. Photography project. Might turn into a business. Could use someone who understands operations and isn't afraid to tell me when my creative ideas are financially insane. I smiled. I'll call you. He left. I went back to packing. By noon, my office was empty, just blank walls and a clean desk and the faint outline where my nameplate had been on the door. I was loading the last box into my car when my phone rang. Catherine. I almost didn't answer, but that felt cowardly. Hello? The board offered you a consultant position. Her voice was flat. Controlled. They did. You accepted. I did. Silence on the line. I could hear her breathing, hear the sound of her office in the background, the soft hum of HVAC, the distant murmur of the floor below. This is cruel, Daniel. This is business. I replied, echoing her words from yesterday. The board wants operational oversight. I have operational expertise. It's a logical fit. You know that's not what I mean. What do you mean? You're going to be here, at his, working with the people, auditing my decisions, constantly reminding everyone that I failed, that I compromised the company, that I, her voice cracked, that I destroyed us for nothing. Not for nothing. I said gently, you destroyed us for Trevor, for the life you thought you wanted, for freedom from being Robert Harrington's daughter who married the acceptable husband. That's something. God, I hate you right now. No, you don't. You hate that I'm not making this easy. You hate that I'm not just disappearing like you planned. But you don't hate me. Another silence. I signed the divorce papers, Catherine said. Martin filed them this morning. You'll be served in the next few days. Okay. That's it? Just okay? What did you want me to say? That I'll fight it? That I'll make it difficult? I told you last night we're getting divorced. We're splitting everything fairly. I'm not going to be vindictive, but you're going to be here at the company for 6 months, and then I'll move on. We'll both move on. This is temporary, Catherine. All of this is temporary. I could hear her thinking, processing, trying to find the angle, the strategy, the way to regain control of a situation that had slipped through her fingers. Finally, will you at least be professional? Have I ever been anything else? She laughed, bitter but genuine. No, you've always been professional, even when you probably shouldn't have been. Is that a compliment? I don't know what it is. I watched rain start to fall again, light drizzle making tiny rivers on my windshield. I should go. Daniel? Yeah, I'm sorry. I know I said it last night, but I need you to know I'm genuinely sorry for all of it. I know, I said, and I did. Catherine was many things, calculating, strategic, sometimes cold, but she wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. She'd made choices she thought were right, choices she thought were necessary, and those choices had blown up in her face. She was sorry. It just didn't change anything. Goodbye, Catherine. Goodbye. I hung up. I sat in my car for a long time, watching the rain, thinking about 12 years of marriage that had ended with 2 goodbyes in a parking garage. Then I started the engine and drove away. The next 6 months were strange. I was back at his, but not really. I had an office on the 19th floor, one floor down from the executive suite, which felt symbolic. And I worked with the external auditing team that Patricia and David had brought in. The auditors were exactly what you'd expect: hyper-competent, detail-oriented professionals who asked uncomfortable questions and didn't care about politics or feelings. They interviewed everyone. They reviewed every contract. They analyzed every financial decision Catherine had made since becoming CEO. My role was to provide context, to explain the history behind decisions, to identify the patterns that numbers alone couldn't show. It was fascinating work, actually, and it was therapeutic. I got to see his the way I'd always wanted to see it, clearly, objectively, without the complications of being the CEO's husband or the acceptable son-in-law or the guy from Tacoma who married up. I was just a consultant doing a job. Catherine and I developed a careful dance during those months. We'd see each other in the elevator, in the halls, occasionally in meetings. We'd nod, we'd say hello, we'd be professionally cordial. We never talked about anything personal. The divorce proceeded smoothly, which surprised me. Catherine's lawyer and my lawyer negotiated everything with minimal drama. We split the joint accounts 50-50. I took the condo in Capitol Hill. Catherine bought out my interest in the Madison Park House, which was fine. That place had too many memories anyway. When we divided the wedding gifts and the art and the furniture like we were liquidating a business partnership, which I suppose we were. By January, we were officially divorced. By February, the auditors released their findings. I was in Patricia Morrison's office when she gave me the advance copy of the report. This is confidential, she said. The board will review it next week, but I wanted you to see it first. I read through the executive summary. The auditors had found significant operational inefficiencies. They'd found several decisions that had cost the company money unnecessarily. They'd found governance violations, minor ones, but violations nonetheless. But they'd also found that Catherine's core strategic vision was sound. Her focus on digital transformation made sense. Her push for sustainable solutions was forward-thinking. Her attempts to modernize Heis's operations were necessary, if poorly executed. The report recommended significant oversight for the next year, but it didn't recommend termination. Catherine could stay if she could learn from her mistakes. What happens now? I asked Patricia. The board presents this to Catherine. We give her a clear choice: accept enhanced oversight, implement the recommended changes, and prove she can lead effectively, or resign. And if she accepts, then we spend the next year watching her very carefully. You'll be part of that. The board wants to extend your contract. I'd been expecting this. For how long? Another year, same terms, same pay. You'd continue providing operational consulting, but also helping implement the recommended changes. Essentially, you'd be an unofficial COO, reporting directly to the board. I thought about that. A year, working at his, working near Catherine, rebuilding the company her father had left her. It should have felt wrong. Instead, it felt right. I'll do it, I said, on one condition. Name it. I want operational authority, real authority, not just consulting. If I'm going to help fix this place, I need to be able to make decisions. Patricia smiled. Done. I'll have Martin draw up the contract. The board meeting where Catherine received the audit findings was scheduled for March 3rd, 1 year exactly since Robert Harrington had his stroke. The poetry of that timing wasn't lost on anyone. I wasn't invited to the meeting, this was between Catherine and the board, but Patricia called me afterward. She took it better than expected, Patricia said. She read the report, she listened to our concerns, she didn't make excuses. What did she say? She said she understood, that she'd made mistakes, that she wanted the opportunity to fix them. And Trevor Walsh? Patricia paused. She ended it. 3 weeks ago, apparently, told him she needed to focus on the company, no distractions. I felt something at that news. Not jealousy exactly, not satisfaction. Just a kind of recognition that Catherine was making different choices now. Better choices. There's something else, Patricia said. Catherine asked if she could talk to you, privately. She said she has something she needs to tell you. About? She wouldn't say, but she was insistent, said it was important. I agreed to meet her. We met at a neutral location, a park near Green Lake, far from his, far from our old life together. It was early March, and Seattle was doing that thing where winter transitions to spring, rain one moment, sun the next, everything green and gray and full of contradictory promise. Catherine was waiting by the lake when I arrived. She looked different, softer maybe. Less CEO armor, more human being. She was wearing jeans and a sweater, and her hair was down, and she looked more like the woman I'd married than the woman who'd fired me. Thanks for meeting me, she said. Patricia said you had something important to tell me. I do. She took a breath. I've been thinking a lot about the past year, about what happened, about how we got here, and I realized something. What? You knew. Long before the board meeting. Long before I fired you. You knew I was planning to end things, and you let me walk into that meeting thinking I had all the power, thinking I was in control, and then you systematically dismantled my plan. You outplayed me. I didn't confirm or deny it. And the thing is, Catherine continued, you could have been cruel about it. You could have exposed the affair. You could have humiliated me. You could have demanded my resignation, but you didn't. You just made sure I understood what I'd lost, what I'd thrown away. Catherine, let me finish. She looked at me directly. I was wrong about so many things, but mostly I was wrong about you. You weren't the acceptable husband. You weren't the guy from Tacoma who married up. You were the best thing that ever happened to me. And I was too blind and too arrogant and too caught up in my own bullshit to see it. The words hung between us. I don't expect you to forgive me, she said, and I'm not asking to get back together. That ship has sailed, but I needed you to know. You were never disposable. You were never inadequate. You were always exactly enough. I was just too stupid to appreciate it. I looked at her, at this woman I'd loved for 12 years, at this complicated, brilliant, flawed person who'd shaped my adult life. Thank you, I said finally, for saying that. Do you forgive me? I don't know, I said honestly. Ask me in another year? She smiled, sad but genuine. Fair. We stood there for a while, watching ducks paddle across Green Lake, watching joggers pass by, watching the city wake up around us. I'm going to be good at this, Catherine said suddenly. At running his. I'm going to prove to the board and to you and to everyone that I can do this right. I know you will. How do you know? Because you're Robert Harrington's daughter. And when you decide to do something, you do it perfectly. You just needed to decide to do the right thing instead of the easy thing. She looked at me. When did you get so wise? When I spent 3 months watching my marriage end and realized I had two choices: become bitter or become better. I chose better. I'm glad, she said. The world needs better. God knows I need better. We said goodbye after that. A real goodbye this time. Not the parking garage goodbye or the kitchen goodbye or any of the other false endings we'd had over the past year. This was the real ending. And it was okay. I signed the 1 year contract extension with his in late March. The work was challenging and satisfying in ways my old business development role never had been. I was finally using my actual skills: operational analysis, process improvement, strategic thinking, instead of just schmoozing clients over expensive dinners. I worked with Catherine occasionally. Our relationship remained professional. Sometimes I'd catch her looking at me during meetings with an expression I couldn't quite read. Regret? Respect? Some complicated mix of both? It didn't matter. We had a job to do. By summer, his numbers were improving. Revenue stabilized. Employee satisfaction scores started climbing back up. We renegotiated several contracts, including the Cascade Tech Solutions Agreement, which Trevor Walsh accepted with professional grace and saved the company millions. The board noticed. You're good at this, David Okoro told me after a particularly successful quarterly review. You should think about doing this long term, consulting, operational turnarounds. You have a gift. I had been thinking about it, actually, and I'd been thinking about James Harrington's offer from months ago, the photography business that needed someone who understood operations. By September, I'd made my decision. I gave the board notice in late September. My contract was up in March, and I wouldn't be renewing. I'd completed what I'd come back to do: help stabilize help implement the audit recommendations, help Catherine become the CEO she was capable of being. It was time to move on. Patricia Morrison took me to lunch on my second to last day. We'll miss you, she said. The board wanted me to extend another offer: permanent position, chief operating officer, full executive compensation package. I appreciate that, I said, but no. May I ask why? Because this was never supposed to be permanent. I came back to finish something, to close a chapter, but my future isn't at his. It never was. What is your future? I told her about James's photography business, about the plan we'd been developing, about how I'd finally figured out that I didn't need to work for a dynasty or live up to someone else's expectations or be the acceptable anything. I could just be Daniel Chen, consultant and business partner and person who helped creative people turn their dreams into sustainable enterprises. Patricia smiled. Robert would have been proud of you. Would he? Absolutely. He always said the mark of a good man wasn't how he handled success, but how he handled betrayal. You handled it with grace. I handled it with strategy, I corrected. Grace came later. She laughed. Fair distinction. My last day at his was March 2nd, 2026. 2 years, almost to the day, since Robert Harrington's stroke. 1 year and 5 months since Catherine had fired me in that boardroom. The company threw me a small goodbye party in the evening. Nothing elaborate, just cake and coffee and a few kind words from various people I'd worked with over the years. Catherine gave a short speech. Daniel Chen has been part of the Harrington family for 14 years, she said. She was standing by the windows, backlit by the Seattle skyline, just like she'd been during my firing. But her voice was different now, warmer, real. He's been a colleague, a friend, a partner, and occasionally a pain in my ass when I needed someone to tell me I was wrong. People laughed. He's helped this company more than most people know. He's helped me more than I deserve. And while I'm sad to see him go, I'm excited to see what he builds next. Because if there's one thing I've learned about Daniel, it's that he's very good at building things, even when other people are actively trying to tear them down. Her eyes met mine on that last sentence. Message received. After the party, after most people had left, Catherine approached me. Can we talk? She asked, one last time. Sure. We went to the boardroom. Empty now. Just us and the city lights and the ghosts of all the meetings we'd had in this space. I have something for you, Catherine said. She handed me an envelope. I opened it. Inside was a check. A big check. 6 figures. What is this? Your share, Catherine said, of the Madison Park house. When we divorced, I bought you out at market rate, but the house appreciated significantly in the year since. I'm paying you the difference. It's what you're owed. I stared at the check. You didn't have to do this. Yes, I did. You were right when you said I treated you like you were disposable. You were right about a lot of things. This is me acknowledging that. This is me making it right. I folded the check, put it in my pocket. Thank you. Thank you, she said, for everything, for not destroying me when you could have, for helping me become better, her voice caught, for being exactly who you were, even when I couldn't appreciate it. We stood there in the boardroom for a long moment. Then Catherine did something unexpected. She hugged me. It was brief, professional almost, but real. Be happy, Daniel, she whispered. You deserve it. You too, I said. We separated. She nodded once, then turned and walked out of the boardroom. I stood there alone for a few more minutes, looking out at Seattle, at the city where I'd built and lost and rebuilt a life. Then I turned off the lights and walked out, and I'm sitting in a coffee shop in Capitol Hill on a Saturday morning in March 2028, reading the Seattle Times. The headline on the business section makes me smile. Harrington Industrial Solutions posts record profits under CEO Catherine Harrington. The article is glowing. It talks about how Catherine has transformed his into a leader in sustainable industrial solutions, how she's expanded into new markets, how employee satisfaction is at an all-time high, how she's become one of Seattle's most respected CEOs. It mentions, in passing, that she's engaged to a local architect named David Park. No mention of Trevor Walsh. That chapter is closed. Good for her. My phone buzzes. Text from James Harrington. James, finished editing the photos from the Iceland shoot. Want to come by the studio later? Also, potential investor meeting next week. Need you to make me sound financially responsible. Me. I'll do my best. That's a tall order, James. Rude but fair. I smile and put my phone away. Harrington Creative Group is thriving. James's photography business has expanded into video production, commercial work, even some documentary projects. I handle the operations, the finances, the boring parts that allow James to focus on being creative. We're profitable, growing, building something that matters. I'm building something that matters, and I'm doing it on my own terms, with my own choices, without needing anyone's approval or validation. The coffee shop door opens, and someone sits down across from me. Sorry I'm late, she says. Traffic was terrible. Her name is Sarah. She's a public defender. We met at a mutual friend's dinner party 6 months ago, and we've been seeing each other since. She's brilliant and funny, and she has no idea who the Harrington family is, which is refreshing. How was court? I ask. Long, frustrating. I won, though. Of course you did. She steals a sip of my coffee. What are you reading? I show her the article about Catherine. That's your ex-wife, right? Yeah. She sounds impressive. She is. Sarah studies me. Do you regret it? The divorce? I think about that, about 12 years of marriage, about the termination plan and the betrayal, and the systematic dismantling of someone else's revenge. About the morning after the board meeting, when I'd sat in my car laughing because I knew tomorrow was going to be fun. It had been fun. Painful, complicated, messy, but fundamentally deeply fun. Not because I'd enjoyed hurting Catherine, but because I'd finally understood my own worth. Because I'd stopped being the acceptable husband and started being myself. No, I tell Sarah, I don't regret it. It was necessary. We were necessary for a time, but we're not anymore. And now I'm here with you, building something new. That's enough. Sarah smiles, leans over and kisses me. Good answer. We sit there for a while, drinking coffee, talking about nothing important, watching the city move around us. Later, I'll go to James's studio. Later, I'll review the financials for our next quarter. Later, I'll call my mother, who retired to Arizona and calls me weekly to make sure I'm eating properly, and tell her about Sarah, about work, about life. Later, I'll live the life I chose instead of the life someone else chose for me. But right now, I'm just sitting in a coffee shop on a Saturday morning, reading the newspaper, drinking coffee with someone I care about. Right now, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be. And tomorrow? Tomorrow will be whatever I make it.